Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright. That there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we made it through the long and deadly night, everybody, only to find out we're done in by Romero's Day of the Dead.
First came the night, then came the dawn. Now comes the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history. George Romero's Day of the Dead.
We've been punished by the Creator. We visited a curse.
Hello? Is anyone?
Andy.
I love when you start a show like that.
I've been thinking about this movie, Day of the Dead, and we're wrapping up our series on Romero's first three Romero Dead movies. This one, we're in a mine, in a bunker.
We are.
We're in a bunker with people who just like to yell at each other. Just a whole bunch of people who like to yell at each other. What's going on with this movie? Let's do a little recap of our series as we wrap it up here, shall we?
Sure. We are celebrating the 50th anniversary of Romero's Dead trilogy. Night of the Living Dead, of course, came out in 1968. And we are, this half of the year, looking at films and series that were released in 1968 and celebrating their anniversary. And we're, for better or worse sometimes. In this particular case, we are looking at Romero's original zombie trilogy. And we're closing it out with Day of the Dead.
We are. This is 1985. And as you are a child of the 80s, certainly you have some astute way to connect pleated pants and this film.
If there ever was a request to connect those two things, I think that might have been the first time of it.
Yes, this was a film of the 80s, and it felt very much of the 80s. And I'm having trouble kind of putting my finger on why that is.
I'm not sure, because I don't think it felt 80s per se. It felt a little dated to me, but not in ways. Well, this will be an interesting conversation, because I think this film ended up bothering you more than it did me. But for me, the thing that does date it the most is the music, which feels I guess I get what they were going for with it, but it really has that kind of synthesizer. It's just that synthesizer keyboard work that all of a sudden sprang into big popularity, kind of in the 70s, and was really taking off in the 80s. There's some really terrible film scores out there that are just all synthesizer music, and this is one of them.
I think this film is a case in point that it's hard to make scary movies with these kinds of synthesizer scores, because as soon as the movie comes on or the music comes on, I'm not scared anymore. There is no sense of kind of atmosphere. In fact, I think you could say that the score sucks the atmosphere from the movie. It actually sucks it. It drains it. The atmosphere and the life, the beating heart of the movie is sucked from it thanks to the sounds of the movie, of the music.
Well, I mean, I feel like it might be a little harsh, but it definitely is a weaker element of it, which is funny because the previous film, Dawn of the Dead, also had some library music that had kind of a dated feel, but I think because of the context of that one, because it's in a mall and the music kind of had this elevator music vibe to it, it ended up fitting in a way that I feel worked perfectly in context of what they were doing with the film, which made for this kind of, you were put into this place where your mind was numb because you were in this elevator music hell where you basically were becoming a mannequin. And I thought that was brilliant in that film. In this particular film, Romero and his composer, John Harrison, who coincidentally also was his first AD, they had, and they'd worked together a number of times before. They were going for kind of a calypso type of music because the story is set in Florida, and we have kind of a character who is kind of from the Caribbean, and but I don't know why they chose to make that choice. It's just a strange decision to go that direction with the music. So that is one element that I do find I end up struggling with quite a bit, because it just doesn't fit with the tone or the kind of the military versus science story.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I certainly have a challenge with that. I want to. And I think you're right. I'm being overly harsh on this movie. There were some things that I thought were fun. It's not the movie that I wanted it to be after the first two that we saw, where that it just felt to me like it was resonant of the time, and that we were getting something more than the sum of its kind of gooey parts, and that they held up much better than I expected. Certainly held up better than this one. This one, I think, had a lot of opportunity that was just sort of squandered. And my biggest problem is that I lose interest when they start studying zombies. to try to find the lingering humanity in the zombies, right? The zombies are not individuals, and that's what is so scary about them, that they are this unstoppable force, right? This unstoppable wave of horror that comes over us, and how we respond as a group is how we move forward as a civilization. And this movie, they have this Dr. Logan, this Frankenstein, who is doing exactly the thing that I find not scary. He's neutering the zombie as a horror device, in my view. And he has created Bub, this zombie that can... he's working up toward, I guess, frontline technical support. He can pick up a phone, and he's reading Stephen King. And I totally lose interest in the movie. And because of that, I'm on this roller coaster where every time we go into the Dr. Frankenstein sequence where we're introducing ourselves back to Bub, I tune out. I can't. I don't like it. It's not scary. And then I have to force myself kind of back into the movie. Oh dear, there's something else going on. What is it that's going on? So, there are some things in, when I'm cresting the rails of the roller coaster that I think are pretty solid. But I just don't think that what they did with the zombie part in the first 3/4 of the movie is interesting. And I'm gathering that you didn't have that challenge.
Not really. I mean, I definitely can see where you're coming from with it. I feel that for me, I like people exploring zombies in different ways. And I think that this is definitely something that Romero really felt with his zombie stories, because we're going to see more of that when you get to his next film, Land of the Dead, when he finally gets that one made, because he's really exploring this whole idea with zombies and that idea of memory. I mean, these were once people, and that's something Romero is really trying to get across in his films, that these zombies, they don't really have functional thought anymore, but they do remember things. And I think that's where he's going with Bub here, where Bub is starting to remember things, even if he isn't really thinking much. Although I will say Bub is kind of thinking, because he certainly is getting excited and getting angry and, feeling some emotions and stuff. So it's an interesting thing that he's kind of exploring with the zombies. And it's really only Bub that is happening with, even though we do see the doctor experimenting on a number of other zombies, which, it's fun to watch him playing and doing his work. I guess for me, I find that it's the story. I feel like there's some intrinsic issues just with the story anyway, even though I really end up enjoying this movie quite a bit. But I feel like there's just so much anger with all the characters. Largely, they're trapped in this bunker.
So much anger.
Yeah, because of this zombie outbreak. And you have the military people who are feeling ineffectual. You have these scientists who are trying to figure things out. All kind of under the direction of this Dr. Logan. And nobody really seems to know what he's up to, even though the scientists are a little closer to him and working with him on some of the stuff. So I George Romero was going into this film. He was kind of unhappy with society and the way things were. Some people say he was a little angry at the time with some of the things going on. And so he was discontent with the government and the way the institutions were running. And so he kind of put that into the film. The military was definitely kind of this disintegrating government. And this crazy scientist, this mad doctor, was basically this guy who couldn't see this humanity that was left through his own mad experiments and had kind of lost sight of the right direction. And I can see what George is doing with them. And I think it's interesting, even if I feel that this story is the one that suffers the most of any of the three films. You have a lot of these angry characters, and they're trapped in this underground, this storage bunker. And it just feels like there's not a lot of sense as to what the purpose is down here, what they're trying to do.
Yes.
How is the military trying to help because it doesn't seem like they're really doing anything.
Well, and that's exactly I think the exact same thing about the military, because they actually force us as audience members to ask that very question, right? When Rhodes says to Steele, "Get out of there, Steele. We've got better things to do," and I can't help but ask myself, what do you have to do? The only time we see you is you getting in the way of these scientists who are ostensibly making an effort to change the world that they live in. They're trying to do some things, and you have just gone bonkers. It is, at 31 minutes, we have the big showdown scene where Rhodes tells Steele to kill Sarah, right? And it says, she won't get back in her chair, so Steele, I want you to kill her. And Steele makes a gag, bang, you're dead, with his fingers. And Rhodes pulls out his gun and points it now at Steele, one of his own men, and says, "You got to kill her right now." It does that whole thing. That whole sequence, it absolutely takes me out of the film. It is overperformed at the very least. It is at the sort of the height of the characters just nonsensically screaming at each other, and sometimes screaming at themselves, at their own jokes. At its worst, it doesn't make any sense to me why they would set up this level of conflict this soon in the film for no reason. There's just no reason for Rhodes to be so antagonistic beyond the fact that he's filling the role of the antagonist.
Well, and I certainly agree with all of that. I do feel, as I watch it, Rhodes is basically a man who has kind of realized that his purpose is gone. Like, there's not much left, and I feel like he's kind of lost it. I mean, he comes across as a guy who just has no sense of anything anymore, and has kind of collapsed internally, and now he's just angry and taking it out on everybody. And so I can see all of that, and I guess in my head I use all of that to kind of get myself through the story, because he is so big and he's so grandiose with everything that he's doing. I just feel like the only logical thing is that he kind of has gone insane because of this whole thing. And that makes more sense to me. And then the whole story kind of falls into step a little bit, because then it's like, well, if he's the head of this military unit, then all the soldiers under him are going to have to do what he says. And so, I can kind of buy into it, even if I feel like some of that is me probably putting it into there, and it may not necessarily have been planned that way.
There are some really nice moments, though, and I think once we step away from the military part of it, which I think is the weaker point for me, there are some really nice moments with the scientists, and I think the pilot that you were talking about, I mean, he has a great little monologue in their bunker in a bunker down in their trailer that they've made look like an island paradise underground, which I think is really great. He's talking about that we've been punished by the Creator. He visited a curse on us, and he talks about the hopelessness of their cause. And I really like that sequence. I think that's really nice, and it comes at a great part of the film, at a great sort of low point for them. And I find some of these little moments really moving, and his character in particular was a good one.
Well, and that's definitely the core of the film. You've got insanity basically on both sides with Logan going crazy doing his experiments, and with Rhodes going crazy leading his troops. Both of it is it's all gone crazy, and I think that that's pretty much what Romero was trying to do, even if the structure of the story wasn't as strong to kind of tell us that, to kind of create that world right out of the gate. With the core trio that we have of Sarah, Bill, and John, I just really like that group, and I think that they have some really great moments. And the one you just pointed out is fantastic, where John is having that conversation with Sarah about what's happening and why and all that. It's fantastic. But also the moment when Sarah has to cut off her boyfriend's arm, Salazar, and breaks down. It's just a really tender moment of comfort between John and Sarah. And I really liked that. This was, a core element of the film that that helps me really quite a bit get through all of the insanity.
And after that sequence, we go deep into some more insanity, and this is more of the insanity that I think I'm expecting and looking for, which is absolutely leaning in on the zombie brawls, right? With the people being ripped apart and heads being torn just straight off of the bodies, and eyeballs and the heads being just split with the shovels, and oh dear, do they absolutely adore the gore in this movie. It takes everything that they've been building from the two movies prior, and just puts a nice little cherry on top.
Yeah, good old Tom Savini. He really went to town with his effects in this particular film, and I really love it. I think that the gore that he creates here it's gross. It's heavy. It's, for anyone with a weak stomach, it's probably too much to watch, but I think it's so creative. It's so fun. He was always trying for something just different and playing around with the things that he could do. And I just really, really enjoy watching all of that stuff. And it's not, I definitely like the last part of the film when you're really seeing all of that stuff happening. It's just fantastic. There's so much just constantly, but even through the beginning of the film with all of the zombies that Logan is studying, and the way that they do those effects, and the guts spilling out, and
I love that word you use. I mean, heavy. That is a fantastic word to describe it. Everything has just this grotesque weight.
Yeah, it really is. It's very visceral, and you can just tell that stuff is actually there. Like when intestines are spilling out, it's intestines spilling out, like actual intestines, like pig intestines that they used over and over and over again. It's fantastic. Well, the lengths that they went to.
And there's an interesting piece to that. Like this movie has, I don't hasten to say, an upbeat ending, right? I mean, we get the sense that there is a future for our main characters here, at least. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but it took me a bit to figure out just where the downer ending occurs, and it occurs in the barracks. It occurs down in the mine and in the silos. When you have there's this extended feasting after the captain gets ripped apart, after Rhodes gets ripped apart, where we just have these low, slow tracking shots. Sometimes through these internal windows, sometimes just along the ground, that just moves us through the barracks. It shows the entire place has just been totally and completely dehumanized. Right? The zombies have won. We may get away in the next sequence, but the zombies have won, and we see that by them eating in some incredibly grotesque and slow and just almost peaceful way that I think is new to this movie, that we don't get in the last one. We certainly don't get in the first one. I just don't think they'd sort of come to terms with what it would look like for the zombies to completely win. And in this one, we see what that looks like. We see when all the humans are gone, all the non-zombies are gone, and this is what a feast looks like. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty bloody and gory, and it is the end of things. I think that it's a really interesting element that you have at the end of this that does allow you to linger on this place that we've spent the last hour and a half in, just basically lost to the humans. It's no longer theirs.
Well, and what'd you think of the actual location?
It's an amazing location that they filmed in. This was I know that there are these places around the world where it's like a former limestone mine that was turned into because of its constant temperature in there, it was basically turned into like this big storage facility and all sorts of things. It sounds like a lot of people would store their boats in there and stuff because they didn't want their boats to be, getting affected too much by the changing winter weather and everything. So they'd put all sorts of stuff in there. They actually built this huge thing out, and I mean, it's this near Wampum, Pennsylvania, and I can't remember. I think it's just called like the Wampum Mine or something like that. And it is a really amazing location, and I think they did a lot of work to kind of explore through quite a bit of it. It's just a really interesting location.
It is wonderful, and there are some great videos, just photographers and videographers who have gotten these wonderful tours that are up on YouTube. So you can go like look through and get this sort of first-person trip through Wampum underground storage and see exactly where this whole film was shot. It's very cool. Apparently, it runs at a constant 50 degrees in there, as you say. Like it's one of those places that you don't have to worry about heat or extreme cold getting at your stuff. But you can also rent warehouse space or like office space, and so you get this underground, secure, 24/7 card access, low utility cost, high proximity to highways, and then go have meetings there. There's the conference rooms and chandeliers, and the walls on all of the conference rooms are limestone. Like it is the coolest looking place that you can imagine. The facility is just amazing, and it's totally retrofit. So definitely check it out. You can find it at wampumunderground.com now and see the vehicle storage and warehousing and office space, and it's very cool.
And I guess that because they were in this cave system for such a long period of time, they basically would get there in the dark in the morning, work all day in the dark, and they'd leave and it would be dark outside. They were all running into health issues because they were in this cave for such a long period of time. They had to have a doctor on set kind of giving, I think, vitamin B shot or vitamin D shots, and but still, like it was really hard on their systems, and something that you should remember before you set up office there.
Okay, that's a good note. Nowhere on the website does it talk about these potential health concerns.
Right.
You should watch that. Also, zombies.
Just in case. Right.
Yeah.
They also filmed in Fort Myers, Florida, at the very beginning with all the scenes when they land and they're trying to find survivors, and you have just the zombie horde coming out, including the alligator or the crocodile. I'm not sure which one it is, but the two trainers are behind it as zombies.
They're the ones kind of stumbling out.
Exactly. But I guess when they were unloading it, when they first got there, the alligator slipped out of the truck and landed on its nose. And so it's got a bloody nose. And so you can see that when it's coming out of the bank, it's got like red on its face. And at first I thought that, I'm like, did they just like leave its mouth tied shut so that it wouldn't bite anybody? But it's actually just blood for the poor creature.
Wow, that's horrible.
I know. This was back in the day when Savini and his team, I mean, they were still kind of working on this indie level with Romero. And also, I just don't think they had thought things through maybe as well as people do nowadays, because when they were done at the end of the day, they would just tell the zombies, okay, well, just take your stuff off. And the zombies would be left to their own devices to like peel all of the latex off of their skin and everything, and like, damaging their skin. That stuff is really hard to get off. And I mean, nowadays, if you're taking that sort of stuff off, there's a makeup crew member there who's helping pull it off very carefully to make sure your skin doesn't get injured. And they were just sending these people home to do it themselves. And people were ending up with all sorts of sores on their faces and everything. And some people were so, they were done at the end of the day and they would just drive home in their makeup. And after a few scares, I guess, at some toll booths and stuff, they had to instill a new rule that you had to take your makeup off before you left set.
Laurie Cardley plays Sarah, and she says that, and I think that's one of the things that's great about this film and her portrayal of it is that she's not a sexed protagonist, right? She is a strong and intelligent scientist, and she's portrayed that way. And as she tells it, anytime she tried to insinuate more of an emotional tone in the film, George would tell her to rein it in, that he really wanted her to be a model of strength. And I think that also makes that breakdown you mentioned earlier after when the shock of what she had just done to her, her beau, taking his arm off like that with the machete, when she breaks down and we get to see that shock, it makes that a more compelling portrayal, a more interesting portrayal, because it's really the only time we get to see her break down in this movie.
It is. It becomes a very powerful moment. And it's interesting. Her character is such an interesting one because she also is the only human female. And she goes through some really difficult situations, like abusive situations from the people that she's working with, almost getting shot by the crazy military guys. And then even her boyfriend kind of freaks out on her and starts hitting her at one point. I mean, she goes through a lot, and the way that she handles herself is really a kind of a figure of strength. And I think that it was really interesting to see how she portrayed that and handled those moments that happened, as difficult as they were. I really enjoyed what she did here. And I know I've seen Laurie in some other films, but this is the only one that really stands out.
And opposite her, literally opposite, we have Joseph Pilato as Rhodes, the captain. And this was pretty new. This whole I don't want to say acting thing, but certainly in his film role, he was in Dawn of the Dead. He had a bit part as a police officer in Dawn of the Dead. And then immediately after that, he was in a film with Tom Savini called Effects, which I have not seen. And then he was given essentially this.
Yeah, and this was, and he was in Knight Riders also.
Right, right. That's true.
Yeah, and so he's, I feel like people who are in Romero's circle, whether it's crew or cast, end up kind of continuing to come back to him in various projects. And so he's one of those guys. And he was a theater actor. He had done a lot of stuff on stage, and I think you can get a sense of that from some of the bigness of his performance as Rhodes. But man, I tell you, as crazy as he is, I end up really liking him. He's just a loon, but he's so much fun to watch. He's, I think it's just because he becomes that guy who is so funny because his stuff is so big and so crazy that I kind of end up really like his stuff sticks in my head probably more than anyone else's.
Well, it certainly makes his ultimate demise that much better for me. I'm not on Team Andy on this one in particular. I find the sort of theatricality, the strength of his performance just makes it overdone in this movie, and it less sinister. Just like he's not a sinister antagonist, and I think we miss that. In this movie, he doesn't add to the sort of fear factor of just as another thing, and you can tell because she doesn't even take him seriously through most of the movie. He becomes just sort of this comical, nut job, and so I'm not crazy about him, but I do love how he goes. And there are some wonderful, just the way that sequence was shot with all the hands and when the doors open and he is just sort of subsumed by the zombies. I think that's a very strong ending.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that because it's a fun story. But I struggle with. I get what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like I feel like he is a really frightening threat because he's so off his rocker that you kind of dismiss him because he's off his rocker. But at the same time, when all of a sudden he's saying, steal, shooter. and then he's pointing the gun at Still. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, hold on. Now I don't know. This guy all of a sudden is a lot more dangerous than I had given him credit for. And I think that's the stuff that I find really interesting with Rhodes, because he's so crazy that you don't buy it until all of a sudden there are weapons pointed at you. And I thought that was actually a really interesting element of his character.
But when did that ever pay off? Like, if he's going to be a threat like that.
I think it totally pays off. He blows the guy. He shoots the guy. Fisher.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. He shoots Fisher.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like it ended up with so many standoff situations with him that I just never found him kind of a compelling antagonist. Like, he was always like, so let's just raise our guns again, vomit and scream, and it was just kind of a one-trick pony. You're right, we do get a little bit of a peak, but
and I mean, and I'm not completely disagreeing with you. It's not handled as strongly as it could have been.
Yeah, and by the same token, we have, speaking of one-trick ponies, we have, Logan, Dr. Frankenstein, played by Richard Liberty, who is a stereotype of a stereotype of a stereotype of himself. He's this just nutso doctor. He's doing his own thing, and it turns out, lo and behold, he's doing something nobody understands and nobody agrees with. And I found that a less compelling narrative argument for the movie.
Well, and that's the one that I would agree with you more. Like, I like Rhodes a lot more than I like Logan. I think Logan is a little too kooky. Like, I enjoy what Romero was going for by making this kind of mad scientist who's kind of gone past the point of logic with his experimentation. I think that there's some really frightening stuff that he's doing, and the experiments, I think, are really horrifying. But I don't feel like the way that he played it, the way that some of the stuff plays out with him and Bub, I end up struggling with it quite a bit. Even though I like Bub and I like what they're doing, I don't know if it's Richard Liberty or if it's the script or both that I end up struggling with, but that's the one that I end up having some more issues with.
I think they missed a great opportunity in the script by giving Logan both the mad scientist, vivisection doctor, and the kind of I don't know what I'm going to say, speech path role, right? Speech path psychologist role of communication. I think they should have separated that and given the whole Bub storyline, assuming that they're all in on it, to her. Because to Sarah, I think she would have been a much more interesting foil to discover that they have this communication piece, and we still have this crazy Richard Liberty as Logan, who's doing his nutso thing, maybe learning something about the brain along the way and destroying these things along the way, but spreading the love of discovery across a couple of other folks on Team Science, I think would have been more interesting and prevented him from having to carry all that weight.
Well, and I'm really curious because this script, when Romero first crafted it, it was a very long script. It was, I believe, over 200 pages. He had written like 5 different drafts of it, and he had issues with his executive producer who was funding the project for him, who wouldn't give him the money that he needed because Romero was really reticent to release it with a rating. He really preferred having the freedom of what an unrated film allowed. And so his budget was like half of what he needed to really make it. And so he had to cut like 100 pages out of his script and really rework it. Now, he says that the script that he ended up making was basically kind of his the script that he was happy with, and it told the complete story. But I can't help but feel that somewhere in the translation from the long version to a much shorter version, that some of these characters ended up we lost opportunities to kind of clean some of that up, and we lost some of the threads that probably would have helped make some of this have a better logic.
Well, didn't he? I mean, he called this his aspiration here, that he wanted to make the Gone with the Wind of zombie movies, right? This is not the budget that makes that movie.
No, and that's, I think that's why he was, I think, frustrated with the fact that he didn't get the money that he was really hoping for.
Right.
And you know, when you have to cut a lot out, you're gonna lose a lot of the effect of some of those story elements.
A couple of more folks in the cast that I definitely want to talk about. Who's high on your list? Because mine are smaller characters.
We already mentioned John and Bill, but I really do enjoy those two, Terry Alexander and Giles Conroy. I just feel like there's a really interesting personality with those two, and even Tony DeLeo, who plays Salazar, her boyfriend. I think those are really interesting. But I think the one that I really enjoy the most is, even though you really struggle with the character, I struggle with some of the elements of it because of the relationship with Logan, but I really enjoy Bub, and I enjoy Sherman Howard portraying him, even if it's a little illogical. I think that it's such a fascinating character, and I really enjoy watching Bub every time he's on screen.
Oh, Andy, when he salutes, he salutes at the end. Really? Oh, it's so dumb. It's so dumb. Real highlight for me, though, is seeing Greg Nicotero as Johnson in this thing. Greg Nicotero ends up dying in the cave. He gets shot when Miller gets his neck chewed off. His gun goes off and ends up shooting Greg Nicotero. Why is Greg Nicotero important in the genre? Well, this, it turns out, was his first assistant job. He was working for Tom Savini, and he went on from there to make a lot of other epic makeup movies. His name is on the credits of 178 other makeup movies, in fact, and he went from consulting producer through co-executive producer to executive producer to just plain owner of The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead. It's that Greg Nicotero. I was so excited to see his name in this movie because it just feels like the circle of life. I wanted to sing that song. So it was great.
It is pretty fantastic to see him popping up, as kind of an assistant here and getting to dig in. And I mean, there a lot of the makeup effects guys that were working with Tom Savini ended up kind of continuing in this world and did quite a bit of stuff after this. But it is nice to see. Well, and
you can
Greg.
see the family. You can definitely see it if you click through the IMDb credits of pretty much any of the featured zombies. They were also on the makeup team and ended up, developing quite fantastic careers as a result of this trajectory. It was very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don Brockett was a featured zombie, and I was very excited about seeing just his name. I couldn't pick him out. I don't know who he was, what kind of hero shot he got, but he was Chef Brockett and Mr. Bulldog and Santa Claus and so much more on Mr. Rogers. He did 135 episodes between 68 and 95, and it somehow delights me that he was also a featured zombie in this movie.
That's hilarious.
Hilarious.
So good. One last little note that I had for the cast: Lori Cardilli, who is Sarah, her father is Chili Billy Cardilli, who was one of the reporters in Night of the Living Dead. He was a Pittsburgh TV personality, and now his daughter was connected with the franchise, which I thought was kind of fun.
How sweet. As long as we've been talking a little bit about Gore and Nicotero, we got to talk more about Tom Savini again on makeup effects with Terry Prince on zombie background masks. And Tom Savini in particular talking about Rhodes's death.
This is one of those moments in the film where it really has kind of become a story that if you know anything about movie gore and movie makeup, this is one of those stories that inevitably you're going to hear about because it's just one of the more famous ones. This moment when Rhodes gets torn apart by the zombies in just the most fantastically awful way, where his guts are getting pulled out and the zombies are just chewing on every little piece of him and he's screaming. It's so fantastic and it's so disgusting in all the best Tom Savini ways. This was the same construction on his torso that they had used on the first zombie that we see in Frankenstein's lab when he kind of sits up and all the guts spill out on the floor. Mm-hmm. We also see when Sarah is having one of her dreams where she keeps seeing zombies, and we see her boyfriend sit up and all of his guts spill out. That was all the same bucket of pig guts that they had been using, and they kept putting them back in the bucket and putting it in the fridge. Well, the crew flew down to Florida to shoot all the Florida stuff, and when they came back up, this was the last thing that they needed to get done, but somebody had unplugged the fridge, and so and it was like the middle of the night. They had no way to go get another bucket of pig guts, and they had to shoot. So they had to use this. Romero says that the smell was so powerful that you could smell it like hallways away before you even got to the room that had the fridge of rotting pig guts.
God.
And they had to shoot with it. And so all of the zombies got like little wax plugs in their nose and everything, so they didn't have to smell it. But poor Joseph Pilato, who is lying there, he had to lay there with it, and you were seeing basically up his nose, so he couldn't have plugs in his nose or anything. And they told him before he came in, they said, whatever you do, do not eat anything or drink anything before you come in today, because you will lose all of it. And so he had to lie there and have this thing, and he had to like just try to breathe through his mouth without smelling anything. The zombies were trying to fan stuff away from him. And they shot it with 3 cameras and they got it in one take, luckily. But still, he was there for like 4 hours while they were getting it built and everything, and getting it prepped. And he said when he was screaming, and when he took that big breath, he said he just almost lost everything right there. It was so bad. Oh, I just can't even imagine. But it's one of those stories that, you'll always have. He says he can still smell it.
Oh, God. I don't care for that story at all. Because, it's little pieces. It's little pieces. When you smell it, it's little pieces of spoiled pig guts in your nose. That's how that works. And it's terrible. And it's making all the hair stand up on my neck.
Rotten pig guts. Rotten pig guts. Yep.
I don't care for it, that story.
You can taste it right now, can't you?
Stop it. Shut up.
Good times. Good times.
In other news, John Harrison's disco synth score is pretty great.
Oh, yes.
Don't you think?
Yes, back to John Harrison. It's funny. He's one of those guys who I think he just kind of came up in the ranks through Romero, because he was his first AD, and he was also composing. He did the music and first AD work on Creepshow. And then he kind of turned into kind of a producer-director. He went on to direct a bunch of stuff for TV, including the Dune miniseries on Sci-Fi Channel, which actually I thought was quite good. So, and we actually have seen him before. He was the screwdriver zombie in Dawn of the Dead, the one who gets that screwdriver in his ear.
That's right. And we talked specifically about how great he took that screwdriver so slowly right in the head.
That's right.
And, speaking of another one that came up in the ranks, here's an interesting one. Pasquale Bubba he was one of the bikers in Dawn of the Dead, and he went on to edit this film. And you know where he went after that? After some other years went by, he edited Heat, which we've talked about on this show.
That's amazing. That is just
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. So that's the movie, and that's where we land on this. Now, of course, there are other movies in this series that we are not talking about.
That's right.
So Romero went on and did more.
He did. He did his second trilogy, which started in 2005. That was Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead. I've only seen 2 of the 3. But I'm curious about the rest of them. And supposedly there are 2 more that are in the works. I'm really curious to see if those 2 get off the ground since Romero passed away.
Wow.
And what's interesting is that's just this particular franchise. That's not to mention other stories. Like there was a prequel to this film called Day of the Dead 2 Contagium, which was released in 2005. And I guess it's an official sequel because Taurus Entertainment Company actually holds the rights to this film, but nobody was actually involved in it. So it's so funny how the rights for Romero's little films, just nobody seems to be able to hold on to them very well.
Right.
There was a loose remake of this film released straight to DVD in 2008. Ving Rhames, interestingly, was in that. So that was, I don't think he played the same character that he was in the Dawn of the Dead remake, but it's interesting that he's in both of those. And then supposedly there was going to be another remake of this called Day of the Dead Bloodline. And so it's interesting that it's a franchise that really spurs on people's creativity, and they want more. They want more zombies.
Now, wasn't Day of the Dead? Didn't that Day of the Dead Bloodline? Did that not get released?
It was
released January 5th, 2018.
Yeah, just this year. Yeah.
Well, clearly, I need to see that.
Yeah, you'll have to.
How'd this one do at awards season?
Well, we talked about this not really being the type of franchise that's going to get a lot of awards, except for people like Tom Savini. This did win a Saturn Award for him at the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, the good old Saturn Awards. He did win an award there, which was great to see. And that was opposite Enemy Mine, Explorers, Reanimator, and The Return of the Living Dead.
Interesting, Return of the Living Dead. If I recall, that has some of the very similar themes, right? That's the one where we actually have the zombie on the gurney talk about her love for brains.
They talk. They say brains, brains. Yeah, that was a very big thing.
Because she says, why do you do it? Why do you eat the brains? Because it because of the pain.
Yeah.
It hurts the pain. Right. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't like that. I didn't care for that.
It's a fun one. Well, it's so interesting because that whole franchise, that's the one that John Russo, who worked with Romero on Night of the Living Dead, they had their creative differences, and he went off to do The Living Dead, and Romero stuck with The Dead, and that's kind of the 2 paths. And Russo had written the Return of the Living Dead, and then Dan O'Bannon from the Alien film, he went on to direct it this same year, and it actually came out just a few weeks after this one.
How did it do relatively at the box office?
Well, Romero wanted, as I said earlier, he wanted $7 million to make this movie, but his executive producer would only give him that much if he didn't go the unrated route, and he really wanted to stick with the gore. So Romero made this final film of his trilogy for $3.5 million, which is about $7.8 million in today's dollars. The movie was released July 19th, 1985, opposite the E.T. reissue, The Legend of Billie Jean, and one of my guilty pleasures, Tom Hanks's The Man with One Red Shoe. It also opened, as I just mentioned, just about a month ahead of John Russo's own zombie follow-up to their first film, Return of the Living Dead. The film grossed $5.8 million domestically and $28.2 million internationally, making a grand total in today's dollars of $34 million. Interestingly, it was not as popular as its predecessor and definitely not as popular as The Return of the Living Dead, which actually made 3 times what this did at the box office. But still, this was successful, making an adjusted profit per finished minute of $676,000. Romero wouldn't return to the zombie films for 20 years after this, but his success with this original trilogy certainly set the stage for his opportunity to do so.
Rightfully so. Even though I have some problems with what this movie is doing and is not doing, I definitely have some fun with it, and I really have fun with this trilogy. And I'm thinking we might need to come back to it, come back to the well here at some point. What'd you think? How'd you feel about doing this original 3?
I have never watched all 3 of them back to back. I had only seen them randomly because I knew they're not connected. It's not the same characters. It's not, nothing is tied together. And so it's not like you have to watch them in order or anything like that. But I just found myself really appreciating just all the kind of craziness that Romero was instilling in this post-apocalyptic world that was overrun by zombies. I had a lot of fun with it. And so I definitely am wanting to revisit this whole trilogy in the future because it's just really gory fun.
I think so too. And with that, I think we ought to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this show. Or you can just swipe over in your show notes, tap Flickchart, and it will take you directly to this film where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
First up, Day of the Dead or Noomies, the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Girl with the dragon tattoo, please.
Yeah, I think I'll say dragon tattoo as well. Day of the Dead or Christmas in July.
Seems rude.
That is such a delightful film. I have to go with Christmas in July.
Yeah, me too.
I want Day to be higher, but I can't put it higher over that one. Day of the Dead or The Emigrants. I will say Day of the Dead.
I will also say Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead or Postmortem. Day of the Dead for me.
Day of the Dead.
Interestingly, both of them could be titled Postmortem. Day of the Dead or Star Trek V, The Final Frontier.
Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead. It's, I did enjoy that movie so much more than I had remembered. But then I think of the cat lady.
That's what pushes you over the edge?
In this particular case. Day of the Dead or Alien 3?
Was that the prison one?
That's the prison one. It's David
Fincher's.
No.
Alien 3. Definitely Alien 3.
Day of the Dead or Clute? I'm Clute.
Clute, yeah.
100%. Day of the Dead or The Game? Definitely The Game.
The Game.
Day of the Dead or Seconds? I'm definitely Seconds.
Seconds. This is easier than I expected it to be.
It really was. Day of the Dead landed at 293 on our chart.
Wow.
293 out of 375. It's about a 22% lower than I would like. But again, we've talked about a lot of really good movies.
What did it do on your personal chart?
My personal chart, it landed at 883 out of 4,056, which is about 78%.
Well, mine landed disappointingly at 815 out of 1,043, which puts it, if I go by the algorithm, this should be a 1-star film.
Ouch.
Over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel. I'm not doing that. It's a better film for me than that. I think I'm going to be a solid 2.5 over at Letterboxd.
2.5. And is that 2.5 with a like?
Are you a like?
I am.
Am I going to average up or down is what I want to know. I think it doesn't matter, but I think I'll probably give it a like because of my affinity for the series.
Well, I'm a 4-star and a like.
That feels aggressively high. But then I'm a 5-star and a like of First Man, so I don't really have room to talk, I guess.
I know I have issues with this film, but this is one of those movies that when I watch it, I end up just smiling through it because it's just so crazy. And so I end up having a lot of fun watching this one. And I feel like I feel like it's actually gotten more enjoyable for me every time I've watched it. So
that's awesome.
It's one of those movies.
I do have a problem with their primary entrance to this thing, to their bunker. Like the only way they can get in is taking this giant flat elevator with like, this like, it's like that cargo elevator.
Yeah, right.
With no windows to get outside. And I love that it's a stupid thing that as you're watching the movie, this is a stupid thing. And then they actually play out what happens when you discover just how stupid it is. And they lower the elevator and all the zombies are standing on it. I think that is so good.
I think that's a great visual too.
It is
it's like I can only imagine standing there watching that thing descend, just loaded down with zombies.
Well, and because Steele is there with his buddies, and it just looks like it looks like a scene out of Three's Company. Like, oh my God, Jack and Chrissy, they're there and they have to run down the hallway and get out because of the. Oh God, it's just too much. It really.
Well, it's an interesting setup for that too. Not to continue belaboring the point, but having the amputee, go basically. Start that thing by sacrificing himself there. So it's kind of an interesting little moment.
And there we go. And that is the end of our discussion of Romero's Dead movies. And that means we get to move on.
Moving on to another, I guess you could call this a franchise that started in 1968. It is, we're kicking it off with Once Upon a Time in the West. It is I guess we're calling it Sergio Leone's Once Upon a Time trilogy. We're going to be looking at Once Upon a Time in the West. We're going to be looking at Duck You Sucker, a.k.a. A Fistful of Dynamite, a.k.a. Once Upon a Time in, I think it's called Once Upon a Time in the Revolution. I don't know. It's a weirdly forced title to squeeze it into this trilogy.
It's Once Upon a Time in the Revolution.
And then there's Once Upon a Time in America, which is the one that we will be wrapping up this next trilogy with.
Are all of these movies epic, big movie? I think they all pretty much are, right?
They are, Once Upon a Time
big.
in the West is just under 3 hours. Duck You Sucker is looks like
157 minutes.
157 minutes. And Once Upon a Time in America, if we're watching the most recently restored edition, which is the extended director's cut, I think it's like 4 hours long. It is
massive. Look at that, 229. 139 minutes U.S. release, 229 minutes European release. I don't know.
The extended director's cut is it's a hefty beast. And that's what I'm going to look at.
So quit your jobs. And that's it. I'm very excited to look at these movies, and we'll be clearly putting in some late nights. But also, Ennio Morricone is back, and he's not making stupid. Sorry.
Oh,
I don't mean, not that I'm holding
Pete.
A grudge over that ridiculous tripe.
Well, if you want to hear more of us, and whether it's about Ennio Morricone's dangerous diabolic music or not, but you can't wait until next week's show, you can support us over on patreon.com/thenextreel and get access to our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee.
We talk about movie news and new trailers, plus we go head-to-head in our weekly challenge, in which we put together lists of movies related in some way to the movie we're discussing that week.
There are all sorts of other goodies too if you support us at different levels. Just head on over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
You can learn more about us and check out the detailed show notes at thenextreel.com.
You can subscribe for free in your favorite podcast app and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at The Next Reel.
And if you want to get into the conversation yourself, join our Discord channel for a whole lot of movie chat with movie lovers from around the world. You can find the link to join in the show notes or on the website.
The Next Reel couldn't happen without the hard work of Stephen Smart running Instagram.
Ben Lott runs all things Twitter.
And thanks to Eli Catlin, who graciously allows us to use his song Ragtime Instrumental as the theme to the show. You can find out more about Eli on his SoundCloud page.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andrew.
As Amazon always doeth.
Amazon does come through for us. I think this week we have an insightful post from M.S. Swanson back in 2002, who watched this film on DVD. When I first saw this one back in 85, I was absolutely trembling with anticipation. Dawn of the Dead was one of my favorite movies, and we had watched it on a Sony Betamax at least 20 times. Fangoria had hyped the heck out of Day, and the gore looked incredible. Well, the gore is gory, but the movie bites the big one. Awful characters played by amateur actors constantly arguing and yelling at each other. A villain so evil that he sneers every line of dialogue and scowls every time he's on camera. Never seen him in a movie since. I wonder why. The whole thing with Bub and the mad scientist was laughable. Actually, the whole thing is a waste. Romero should have waited until he had enough money to do it right. After the opening credits, the entire movie is filmed in an underground bunker, and yes, the claustrophobia is contagious. I was out of my seat and into the sunshine before you could say missed opportunity. Boom.
Wow.
Missed opportunity. I guess, I'm going to mark that as helpful. Do you know who else marked that one as helpful? 8 other people. 8 people found that review helpful. And now it's 9.
Now it's 9. Well,
That's
I've
nice.
got one, Pete, that has 10 people who have said it's helpful. Actually, I don't know if I should say that. I take that back. 3 people found it helpful. 10 people commented.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
those are very different
There's
things.
Different thing, yes. But this is by Bonnie Dean, who screams it in all caps. It says, I want my money back for this one. I loved The Night and Dawn of. This one had such bad language, I could not watch it. I love blood and guts, but that little 4-letter word, you know which one, really puts me off. What I enjoy most about this is you get a fantastic bunch of comments, one of which says, the reviewer is nuts. I don't mind shooting, beheading, eating guts, dissection, and rotting corpses, chasing people, but just don't say a naughty word? Seriously? So what do you say when marooned in an outpost with the same people for over a year, hordes of zombies wanting to eat you alive or turn you into one of them, and you lose your temper? Oh, poot. Those dad-blamed zombies are after us again.
Oh, poot.
Oh, so good.
That's good. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective, the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver.
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts, and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.